Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on issues. You're listening to Out Front with Mike Shelby.
All right. Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Out Front. It is Open Line Friday. I'm really looking forward to some of these questions. By the way, if you ask me a question in the chat, I talk about Russia and China, and I mean the whole team does, and about lots of stuff over at Forward Observer on our high side briefing, which is every day at noon. And I get about an hour to prepare for this show. And I really want this show to be about how to prepare for the future. And I'm talking about first layer solutions. I ain't talking about bug out bags and MREs. I'm talking about tribe and community and building local logistics and localizing as many of the things that you need, localizing that as much as possible, whether that is building those things, building businesses that do those things, finding someone who's retired, someone who's out of work, someone who is underemployed, and getting those people to okay, you used to be a welder, I don't know, whatever. You've got some level of expertise in this area. And if there's a viable business, let's start a business, so on and so forth, especially people who are retired. They're looking for something. All right, you're looking for something to do. Let's figure out what we're going to need in the future that's not going to be there. And let's start thinking about how we are going to make those things magically appear for us. Because if we don't, no one else will. All right, this is Out Front, where we talk about intelligence security, creating a first world zone in a third world country, and how to win at low intensity conflict, or at least not lose. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. It is Open Line Friday. By the way, before we get started with Q&A, I've got two really good questions we're going to start off on today. Thank you, everybody, for the comments. I didn't do the show yesterday, but I uploaded a quick video. I appreciate all the comments, the thoughts, and prayers. And, I was feeling really bad, but I'll be honest, it felt really good to see everybody say, hey, get well soon. That was really great. So I really appreciate the outpouring of support. All right. We have two great questions. I'm just going to jump into this. Mike, listening to your podcast today, this was yesterday, and talking about working for livestock breeders got me thinking about a point I've brought up to my group. For guys with plenty of good equipment and capability, do you or the livestock breeder or the rancher believe that ranch security, especially with night vision, would be a viable trade option? This idea was reinforced when you brought up cattle theft on the rise. Great question. Let me address this. I'm going to preface this by saying I don't know how bad the future is going to be. I have a high degree of confidence that the future is, when I say this, I think the future is going to be much more disrupted than it is today. Peter Zian talks about global economic collapse in the coming decade, over the next 10 to 20 years. I don't know that that's going to happen. Reading his book, he has a strong argument. He has a real strong case for that. Even prior to reading Peter Zian's latest book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning, one of my primary concerns is that the United States is becoming a third world. And life is very different in the third world. I think there's a lot of normalcy bias out there. I think there's a lot of people who think life is going to... My last tour in Afghanistan, I used to go back and forth. There was this older gentleman, and I actually haven't talked to him in a long time. I hope he's still alive. I need to reach out to him. But he was an electronics engineer. And my dog's bored. He was an electronics engineer, and we used to argue. I said, look, man, the future, the things that are going to happen and this was 2012, maybe 2011, actually. It's my last tour in Afghanistan, and in 2011. And I said, look, the future is going to be way different. There's so many things coming down that are going to happen in the future. He said, Mike, man, life has always gotten better. And he was probably close to 60 years old. He had a daughter in his youngest daughter was in college, and he said, life has always gotten better. And he said, there have been, 6 months or a year or two here and there where life's gotten worse, but man, life for humans has always gotten better. It will always get better for humans. And I get that sentiment. I do, especially if you're 60 years old. Here's the problem. If you're 60 years old, you have lived for the best 60 years of human existence. You have lived right at the top pinnacle of human existence, especially in the United States. That is all you know. And I would just like for people to consider the alternative. Consider that life does not continue going up, that the quality of life, standard of living does not keep blasting off like a rocket ship from here. And maybe we do go through a decade or a generation of very, very difficult. I mean, look, all throughout, you read the history of empires and collapsed states, and you learn that when an empire collapses, life stops getting better. It gets much, much worse. And sometimes that can last for a generation, 100, 200, 300+ years. Not only that, I'm not saying that the United States is going to be invaded. I doubt that happens. But Spain, Catholic Spain, lived under Muslim rule for 900 years before things got better. And I just want you to consider that maybe life doesn't always get better. And maybe it's a generation, maybe it's 100, 200, 400 years before we get over this post-industrial collapse. Because I agree with that. With the whole peak oil argument, and things have always been better, cheaper, faster, as Peter Zion says, and now they're going to stop getting better, cheaper, and faster for a period of time. And then eventually this thing's going to work itself out. Eventually life will get better. And I'm not trying to be a doom and gloom. I'm trying to be a realist. I'm trying to focus my attention on the alternative to life will always get better. And the alternative to that is life may get precipitously worse in the near future, the next 5-10 years especially. So this question, people may think, oh, ranch security, ooh, that's extreme. Security is a massive focus in the third world. And this is something that I've talked with groups before about ranch security. And yesterday I mentioned, there's a group that was talking about starting like a countywide kind of cattle watch and hay thief watch, kind of like a neighborhood watch, but specifically looking for cattle thieves and hay thieves. And I think that's a great idea, especially if your area is already experiencing those things. Do you think if we go through a period of food insecurity, that hay theft and cattle theft and livestock theft and food theft is not going to get worse? It's inconceivable to me that that's what would happen. So I think there's quite a bit of normalcy bias out there. And in terms of food security, if you're 60 years old, you have never been, and I get that people grow up in poverty and there's food insecurity. There's been no American in the past 60 years who has risked starving to death. There is so much food. It is so abundant and historically been so cheap here in the United States. I would just ask that you consider the alternative, that maybe we take a breather. Maybe for a period of time, food is not as abundant and food is much more expensive than it has been. So is that a good trade-off? Yes, potentially. It depends how bad the cattle theft is. That's something that you're going to have to ask local ranchers about, because I'm sure in some areas it's far worse than others. I've talked about this around here. One bad problem we have is people leave their gates open at night, the gates on their driveway at their ranches, especially. And dudes in trucks will just roll up in there. And if they see farm implements or a trailer or stock trailer or any kind of trailer, they'll just load that trailer up and haul off, and they'll never see it again. And it's gotten so bad that in Texas, if you don't have a title to the trailer, if you own a trailer and you do not have the title, you have to go through this very complex process to prove to the state of Texas that you did not steal it, so that you can get a license plate for it. so that you can register it with the DMV in Texas. And I don't know, I imagine that's probably about the same in other states. So anytime there's a pain point, there will be people in search of a solution. It depends how bad that pain hurts. One problem that we see with insurance, and especially we see this in cybersecurity, nobody wants to spend money on cybersecurity. Let me rephrase this. Many organizations are reluctant to spend a lot of money on cybersecurity because they don't know if it works. They only know if it doesn't work. So same thing with security, right? If you have a presence patrol or you got dudes out there with night vision, I don't know, whatever, you may deter a cattle theft or hay theft or any kind of theft from these farms or ranches. But you may not know that it's working when maybe it is working. So, part of this for me is how do I measure this? I was actually just listening to a podcast about the U.S. Special Operations, specifically Special Forces teams in Colombia, and how they were doing anti-narcotics and counterinsurgency stuff. And this Colombian, I think it was a general, was on the podcast, and he was talking about how for a long time they measured success in Colombia by the amount of arrests they made or by the amount of cocaine or drugs that they were confiscating. And he said, we are just every year, we just confiscate more drugs. It's just, we confiscated more this year. We'll confiscate more next year. And the confiscation was not a good measurement of success. It was a measurement of the cartels and the production down there are producing so much cocaine that they're still stopping 1 in 10 shipments, but those shipments are getting bigger. Or, now instead of 1 in 10, they're capturing 10 in 100. So they really were not making a dent by that measurement. So I would also just recommend, how are we going to measure success? Because part of the thing is, whenever you are providing security to someone, especially if they're paying money or providing something in return, such as cattle or something like that, if you do this for months and you say, hey, we haven't seen any cattle thieves and we also haven't stopped any cattle thieves, I don't know if I don't know if the rancher is going to continue to trade for that. But, it's just an idea, just a thought that I had. How are you going to measure? How are you going to prove that you're actually being effective? But yeah, in general, anytime crime rises, which I think crime absolutely will rise in many places, it already has, especially organized crime. Yes, I think that's a good, it is a viable option. I'm not saying it will be a good option in every case. But yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, in general, I agree. There was somebody, let's see here. There was somebody who mentioned something else. I'll get to the rest of the comments, questions and comments later on. Matt with a $10 super chat. Matt, thank you very much. Who can we get into contact with about the Gettysburg class? We can get in touch with me. If you go to forwardobserver.com and you use the contact form, that really is the easiest way to get in touch with me. And because it'll go right to our support box. And so, yeah, I can get you the details. Here's the deal. If you've taken any of my SHTF intelligence classes or any of the TAC Intel, it's just basically the same class, just slightly different names. If you take that once, you can come back and take it for free as an alumni. So, or as an alum or whatever the Latin is. And as a matter of fact, in Gettysburg, we do have some returning students who are taking the class absolutely free. That's one thing. I'm not here trying to nickel and dime everybody. They took the class last year. They're coming back this year for a refresher. They'll also get some more stuff because pretty much at the end of every class I teach, I think, oh, this is a better way to do this. Or, hey, let's try to maybe do this exercise next time instead. And so I'm always trying to tweak here and there. So, yeah, absolutely come back for a refresher if you have. So, Matt, just send me a message on the Fort Observer website. I will definitely get back to you. All right. Flyover State, $5 super chat. Appreciate all the intel and analysis. You're very welcome. Thank you for the support. Very happy to do this. All right. The next question is also, we're going back to Peter Zian. Mike, Zian is good at covering the macro, but doesn't cover the community level of what happens. So question for you. is there a need for producers of vices, bootleggers, pot growers, tobacco, etc., in the spectrum of apocalypse to low-intensity conflict? Yes. You know, the first person I ever heard about who talked about this concept was John Mosby, Mountain Gorilla, and he runs a Mountain Gorilla blog. And he was talking about how in the third world, especially in other places, other gray zones or other places where there's low intensity conflict or pretty much anywhere else in the world, yes, vice items absolutely have barter value. Cigarettes, alcohol, tobacco, whatever. I mean, I'm sure at some point, marijuana will have some, I don't want to get kicked off of YouTube here. I don't know what YouTube's policies are, but yeah, the wacky tobacco might have some barter value. So yes, I would say that, in general, I think if you're planning on bartering, okay. Dustin says YouTube's cool with it. I don't know anything about marijuana. I've never actually even done marijuana. I've never done any drugs in my life yet. So that is a valid theory. Yes, that vice items will have value in a collapsed society. They absolutely will. You're always going to find someone jonesing for a cigarette, the guy that wants a shot of whiskey, whatever he's got. All right. So yes, there is a need for that. All right. Let's see. Another thing. Oh yeah. All right. So I was recently in an area where marijuana was legal. And I was amazed. Everyone says, "Oh, legalize marijuana. You'll take all the power and money away from the cartels, and the state will get tax revenues, and they'll be able to put it towards schools or fire departments or whatever, and life will just be great once marijuana is legalized." That was not my takeaway. My takeaway, and by the way, I'm not. You can probably tell what my personal feelings are on marijuana if you listen to the show frequently. And I'm not advocating for legalization of marijuana. I think there are some merits to it. Generally, I don't think it's in many cases it's not any worse than alcohol. However, there is a massive amount of illegal activity that goes on with these marijuana farms. And I know an individual, and she had this, I think maybe she still owns this large, successful marijuana farm in California. And she may be the exception. I don't know if this is the rule, but if she is the exception, the rule is that these grow houses and these marijuana farms are run by cartels and organized crime. And if you're cool with that being in your county, if you're cool with all that money, my concern about that, and again, I'm not lobbying for or against this. I'm just pointing out some facts here, something that I didn't know or didn't consider, is that once these cartels and organized crime, once they have massive amounts of money from selling drugs, just like in Mexico, they wield a massive amount of power and influence because they are able to build political, social, and economic power. And so my question is, hey, I'm trying to do that too. Why would I want to invite someone in my county who's going to be able to probably build more political, social, and economic power than I can? And I don't think that's a good way to do business heading into this decade where I think things will get much worse. Because at the point where they can start paying off law enforcement, they can start paying off politicians, there's nothing you can do. That's why all these people from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador are trying to get up to the United States. Yeah, part of it's because they're going to come up here and get free stuff or whatever. But a lot of them are trying to escape the violence in those communities at the hands of the cartels. Why would I want to do anything to enable the cartels to come to the United States and wield more power? So I would say that may be an overlooked second and third, fourth, fifth, sixth order effect of legalizing marijuana. So I'm sure vice items will maintain their value. Yes. All right, Dustin, can you please help me find some questions in the chat? I'm going to go through here. BW says, I'm trying to get ready to get a milk cow, something we don't have in our localized area. Yeah, I know a homesteader, and, I'm going to text him actually this afternoon because I had that same thought. Hey, I don't have time to milk a cow 2 or 3 times a day. I don't know anything about, although my grandpa was a dairyman, I don't know anything about cows, milk cows. So I thought, why don't I just see? If I bought a milk cow and I got him to take care of it, and he could have some milk and he could sell some milk and do whatever, and once a week give me a gallon of milk or whatever, that may be a pretty good trade-off. Maybe that's a lot of gallons of milk. But yeah, in terms of stuff not being on the grocery shelves, or a gallon of milk being double what it costs a year from now, today. So I don't know. I think that's a good idea. Dustin, by the way, if you have any questions, please put them in our chat here. Mike, have you ever looked at the Global Village construction set that is being worked on by Open Source Ecology? Yes, Factor E Farm. A couple days ago, I talked about I had initially rented a home on 20 acres. I was going to try my hand at being an organic hippy dippy farmer and an armed gardener. And yeah, that's one of the things that I thought was very interesting. Factor E Farm. One thing they do, Open Source Ecology, and they had this big farm in Missouri. I don't even know if they're still around, but yes, I have heard of them, and I did follow them there for a while. And just Google it. It's super cool what they're doing. They're making open source plans to build a tractor. You don't need to go buy a Kubota or John Deere or a whatever tractor companies out there. You can build, if you have engineers and some metal fabrication folks, you can build your own tractor. And one of the things that they're doing at Factory Farm and through Open Source Ecology is they are trying to build, like Criseo says, a global village construction set, ways that you can metal fab your own industrial equipment without having to buy industrial equipment in a post-industrial collapse. I thought that was pretty interesting. Let's see. Dustin, we got any more questions? Oh my gosh. So if the U.S. collapses, what happens to our oligarchs like Elon Musk and SpaceX or Jeff Bezos and Amazon? I don't think they all go to their bunkers and live out their days. Or I do think that. I don't know if you do or don't think that. I've mentioned this probably a year or two ago. There's a guy, and he consults with high net worth individuals. And he was in a meeting with a bunch of bankers, and they started asking him about how they should be setting up their retreat properties. And these are like billionaires from Silicon Valley and other places. It wasn't just bankers, but some bankers were there. And they were the ones asking about retreat properties and kind of, apocalypse bunkers and SHTF into the world Teotihuacan retreats. And one of the guys asked, he said he has security. He has a security team for his into the world bunker. And he asked, and he was serious. He said, how do I keep my security guards from turning on me if we have to go to this thing? And he thought that was a very interesting question. And basically, there's absolutely nothing that guy can do in that case. So I thought that was funny. But Elon Musk, like these guys, they've all got places up in the Canadian Rockies or out in New Zealand or whatever. They've got places. And I've heard some people say, oh, that's just because they need to put their money somewhere, so they're buying real estate. Have you seen some of these multi-million-dollar retreat properties? I mean, they've got the air filtration system and the whatever HEPA filters and the things that seal off in case of a like chemical or biological attack. They're outfitted with solar panels. This is not somewhere they're going to spend a week on vacation with their family. These are literally doomsday bunkers. and not all of them have these things, but they have become quite popular. They're that guy that started building those in underground bunkers. First it was tornado shelters, and then it's like, hey, we're gonna deck this thing out like Trump Las Vegas or whatever. And these are for very, very wealthy people. So I don't think this is a case of, hey, I just need to put my money somewhere. I think they understand the risk of post-industrial collapse, peak oil, demographic collapse, nuclear war, whatever things that are going to affect us in the future. So I don't know. What was the question the original question? Oh yeah, where do they go? Do they go all live in bunkers? I don't think they go to bunkers and live out their days. I think they probably kind of depends what happens to the dollar, although something catastrophic does happen. I don't know. It kind of depends on what happens. But no, I think they're probably the ones, some of them are probably the ones who will try to rebuild society. And again, this is, the more extreme the prediction, I think the less likely it is to come true. However, asteroids killed the dinosaurs. So very extreme things do happen, but they're low frequency. So honestly, all this talk about EMPs and stuff, I'm way more concerned about post-industrial collapse or demographic collapse than I am about an EMP. Good question. All right, next question. Do you honestly think the cartels aren't paying off our politicians for the illegal immigration? I don't think they're paying off politicians for illegal immigration. I do think in some cities there absolutely is a handshake agreement where cartels and organized crime fund these coffers for political campaigns, and in return, police are allowed to go after the gangs or go after the cartels to a certain degree, not enough to severely threaten the cash flow. And I think it's this kind of mutually beneficial relationship in some cities. And I've heard that directly from law enforcement, who in these cities, in front of us multiple times, who in these cities say they were not allowed. They wanted to go after ringleaders of organized crime. They were never allowed to go after ringleaders. It was always these low-level schmucks. And, I heard that, and that was their conclusion. And I thought, I can't prove it, but man, I believe that. Like, yeah, it's feasible. I believe that could be the case. And then you start to look at all the corruption and stuff that's going on. I mean, just like this, I don't want to say her name on YouTube. I'll get censored. Just like this coordinator of underage females, she's going to prison. And I'm like everybody else. She's got lists of people, of clients. Why are they not being arrested and prosecuted? Really makes you wonder. Really does. All right, next question. How will the Democrats cope with the U.S. in recession? First and second quarter was negative. Has second quarter numbers been posted yet? If they have, I haven't seen them. But I'm widely I don't know. I'll have to look it up later. However, I just talked about it today. GDP Now says we're negative for the second quarter. And if that ends up being the case, and we are already in a recession, and Kathy Wood was right that we're already in a recession, how do Democrats cope with it? My concern about in a period of stagflation, which lasts years, this is something that Ray Dalio and Greg Jensen have been talking about since 2017, stagflation that lasts for years. And, my concern is that anytime there's greater economic need, all this talk about UBI, universal basic income, comes back. And they've already been doing these UBI trials in some cities. And I think even the state of California, I think maybe was even floating some kind of UBI program. There were the baby bonds that Booker and that other guy were talking about. Basically, when every time when a baby is born in America, the federal government will put like $3,000 or $2,000, however much money, into a bond. And then by the time that baby turns 18 years old and presumably turns into an adult, he or she will have all that money to go to college or do whatever. So that kind of those kinds of economic solutions always come up. And so, my concern is that if we are in a period of a decade or generation of very, very bad, like negative, shrinking, contracting economic conditions, that all that UBI and let government take care of you and cradle to grave socialist type stuff coming back. I think that's how Democrats cope with it. I think that's probably how Democrats, if they lose power, that's probably how they'll get back into power, is just by promising people free stuff, free money. We're going to tax the billionaires and take care of everybody. All right. Next question. Best breed for Teotihuacan dog. Well, it depends what you want to use them for. Do you have kids and what type of environment you live in? Are you in an apartment? You on a ranch? So always, when anybody asks about anything deer, I always say, okay, let's look at our operational environment, and then let's look at our mission requirements. What are we trying to do? Now, presumably, you want a dog that's going to bark when something goes bump in the night, and a lot of dogs will do this. Labs are barkers. They're also very good with kids. I think they're easy to train, good temperament. German Shepherds are another one. Protective instincts. It just kind of depends. And I'm not a dog expert, but I have an Irish Wolfhound, and if I could clone him and just have one of those made, like once every 5 to 10 years, have another one made, I'd do that for the rest of my life. A copy of this dog right here for sure. Absolutely, I would. But again, what is that dog supposed to be doing? All right. That's a great question. Next question. Oh, it's John S. Put my sunglasses on for this one. All right. Could people use septic systems to render out ammonium nitrate fertilizer to make up the gap in availability? Man, that's a good question. I don't know. Again, I'm not super prepper. You want to talk about beans, bullets, and band-aids? Like there's 1,000 YouTube channels that talk about that. I really talk about operational preparedness, these second layers. But actually that almost is a second layer question, because you're talking about alternative sources of things like fertilizer. And the question is, I just don't know. I don't know. Dustin, can you put that question back on there, please? Okay. Ammonium nitrate fertilizer. John, you're the dude. Ammonium nitrate. Bad boy. All right. I fell for that one. John, I don't mean to be picking on you, but you're the guy that asked, when is it time to take back our country, some weeks ago? And I didn't answer that question. Where are my sunglasses? I got them around here somewhere. All right. Next question. Do any communities still have public fallout shelters? Ammonium nitrate. Do you think they'll make a comeback? Our town just recently filled our old one back in 2020. Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, I think I don't think anybody's serious about nuclear war. I mean, yeah, like the nuclear war people are. And the prepper space is all about nuclear war, preparing for it at least, surviving it. If we get back into a period of Cold War where it's like, mutually assured destruction, yeah, sure. I could see some of that stuff get slipped into the infrastructure bills. Otherwise, I don't know. Tornado shelters are probably far more common than nuclear fallout shelters. And at the point you can build a tornado shelter that could double as nuclear fallout, well, there you go. Next question. seems most likely scenario is not apocalypse, but somewhere between narco Mexico and depression. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we're going to have Mad Max. I just think life's going to be far more difficult over the next 20 years than it has the last 20. And life's been so good over the last 20 years, these past couple of years, being the exception to that. 1980 to 2020 it's been a great run, a great 40 years. But I think we're going to go backwards for a little while before we pick back going up. So yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to be Mad Max. I just think life's probably going to be a lot more like Latin America, where the thing that I see is a continued bifurcation of the economic strata, because you have wealth inequality is potentially going to pick up from here, where you have favelas and then you have walled compounds with really nice homes and pools, and some cities are already like that. So yes, I think that will become the norm across most places. Dustin, next question, please. Logistically, what is your opinion of living in an area that is landlocked? You mean landlocked like political boundaries, like living in Colorado, for instance, or Wyoming? More than just landlocked, I'm looking at what the physical terrain looks like. Someone said the other day, it's very difficult to move. It's very difficult to move supplies through mountains. And so, that's one thing. If you live in a very mountainous area and the global supply chain does break down, you're going to be a lot harder to resupply for everything. Number one. Number two, one of the things that we found back during Hurricane Harvey in whatever year that was, 2017, I think, is in Houston. All the rural areas around Houston did it was days, maybe a week or two, before they started getting fuel back to those areas, because all the fuel that would have gone out there was being piped into Houston and delivered into Houston to get Houston back up and running. So in addition also to being landlocked, if you live near a major metro area, the population centers are probably going to have priority for supply distribution, I would imagine, in maybe not all, but in most cases. So if you do live outside a major mega city or metro area, some large population center, that may be something you keep in mind. That's why I'm all about trying to localize as much of my supply chain as possible. What do I need or want on a daily basis? And let's figure out how to grow that ideally within a few miles of me, but realistically within a tank of gas of me. Next question. Mike, I've accepted the likely outcome, some sort of financial collapse in the future. I'm worried about things Democrats will do to solve it. How likely are price controls in the light of Zian's book? I would say nearing +6, carry the 1, probably nearing 100% that we see price controls in Zian's future. They're not going to my outlook is that they try to control as much of that stuff as possible. They try to be the gatekeeper as much as possible on the distribution of goods. And the problem with the free market system is if you've got the money, you can buy it. Well, just like we saw with personal protective gear back during COVID, they didn't want the average person buying that stuff. They wanted first responders and the right people to get those things. Will price controls necessarily do that? In that case, no. But, I do think nationalization of industry, I think, is on the table. More involvement by government at the state or federal level for some of this stuff in terms of distributing stuff, who gets what and when. I think that's clearly on the table. So price controls, we might see price controls in the next year or two. All right, next question. Actually, you know what? Let me address this because there's a comment in here. Trenton says, I'm old and not living in an effed up world. Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we talk about this stuff on the show sometimes because I don't mean to doom and gloom people. I think life's going to get much more difficult over the next 20 years. However, I am hopeful that if we can do things the right way, that we can have some form of renaissance. Maybe renaissance is a bad word, but this happens almost with every collapsed empire, every failed empire. It is something eventually gets rebuilt in its place. And will I live long enough to see that? I don't know. Will my kids? I hope so. It may be grandkids. I don't know. But eventually it will get better. So do not despair. Do what you can, if not to make your life easier, then to make your kids or the next generation's lives easier. And if we all do that, then eventually somebody's life is going to get a lot better. Even if not mine. All right. Sorry there, Dustin. I'll throw that question back up. Have you read much about motivating your community and how to encourage your most involved when they do not see the broader community get involved? Yeah, that's a good question. I do hear from a lot of people, they say, oh, my preparedness network's suffering from a lack of urgency, or the numbers have fallen off from the meetings. And I don't know how much of that is cyclical. Like, okay, in the summer, you got T-ball, whatever, and the tournaments and whatever. Okay, you're going to Yellowstone for a week. You're going here, you're going there. You're taking vacation, going to the beach. And yeah, maybe that's part of it. For me, it's relevance and utility. How relevant is this group to the average member's life? The more relevant you are to their lives, the more they're probably going to participate. And then utility. Do people show up and just shoot the breeze and BS for an hour and say, okay, great meeting, everyone, see you next month or next week or whenever? Or do you go there and you work on projects and you start lining up things like, I just had some buddies come over and we put a roof on the greenhouse, and they're members of the preparedness network. And, if you have projects like that where people can come get involved, they can learn. And not only that, but if they put sweat equity into someone else's project, then the next time they need something, they will probably have dudes show up at their house to help them. So there's that saying, culture eats strategy for lunch. Now, if culture eats strategy for lunch, I think it was Peter Drucker. Imagine what happens when you have culture and strategy. But culture is very important, and I don't see the average prepper channel talking about. Well, I don't even watch the average prepper channel, but I've for every 1,000 articles and videos on bug out bags, there might be one on building a good culture in your group. And it's a very, very important part. Everyone wants to talk about tribe and stuff. Well, your tribe's going to have a culture, and there has to be some method of enforcing cultural norms. And cultural norms guide people's thoughts and actions and behavior. And, it's self-reinforcing because people's thoughts and actions and behavior and attitudes all point in the same direction, mean you have cultural norms. So I would go back to relevant. Here's the other thing. You show up to the meetings and you pitch into work, and we're going to take care of you. You don't show up to meetings and you don't pitch into work, and we're not going to spend our resources and time helping you if you haven't been around. So, I think maybe that's another way, kind of a carrot and stick, to enforce the culture of show up and help when we need people to show up and help. I hope that answers your question. Next question. Oh, we're already at 46 minutes. All right, I'll do this one and one more, and then that's it. Mike, anyone who doesn't own land is going to have a bad time with a future financial situation. How can we help our kids not become landless peasants? Yeah, that's a great question. I guess that's in reference to the English Civil War. In the 100-year lead up to the English Civil War, the share of landless peasants of England went from 11% to 40%. At 40%, 40% of English citizens or subjects were landless peasants. 40%. How can we ensure that doesn't happen? Well, right now, priorities among young people, not all of them, but among young people, there's with interest rates and the value of the dollar and wages, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. Maybe it goes back to culture. And maybe once we start getting into food insecurity rather, once the average American realizes that he and she are becoming food challenged, maybe they'll be like, actually, buying some land is probably a good investment. And being able to work the land is going to make sure that I've got food. So I don't know. Maybe we have a back to the land movement more so than we already did. I don't know. Maybe that's just going to drive up prices. I don't know. But listen, this is not financial advice. I don't do predictions, and I certainly don't provide financial advice. However, if I had a bunch of money that's just sitting around somewhere, and you're going to buy land in a place that was arable or could produce something of value, and presuming that you could float the property taxes on it, I would absolutely be buying land. People up here, they're buying land in Central Texas sight unseen. So I think people are already there. In terms of how you can get young people back to the land, I don't know. As a former young person, I don't know. All right, we'll do one more question and then we'll hop off. Who gets what when? With all the shortages I'm hearing about, it seems like the red states are certainly getting hit the hardest already, both medicine and food shortages. Controlled distribution. Well, I mean, the Trump administration was accused of that. The Biden administration was accused of that. Just like when Biden went in and said, Florida can't use the monoclonal antibodies treatments anymore. If doctors are... All right, so at any rate, yeah, that may become more common. I don't know. The federal government doing things to states controlled by opposition parties. It's political warfare. It's low-intensity conflict. It's here. It ain't going nowhere. It's going to get a lot worse. We have to live to deal with it. That's why as much as possible, we need to be regionalizing and localizing our supply. It's water, food, anything you need or hope to have in the future. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Everyone have a great weekend. I will not be on the show on Monday. I will try to record a video for you this weekend. By the way, I'm not 100% positive. I think I may be renaming this channel so I can put a bunch of other content stuff on here. More on that later. So everyone have a great weekend. I will see you back Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Time. Until then, be well and stay out front.